Investigating Special Education Law in Minnesota. The state requirements for identification and evaluation. I would like to start by explaining how Minnesota defines identification and evaluation. First, school districts have many responsibilities to fulfill in order to follow Minnesota state standards and regulations for both identification purposes and evaluation. Identification is the continued effort by a school district to identify, locate, and screen students from birth through age 21 who may need special education services. This also includes identifying students that are in a private school, homeschooled, homeless, or migratory children, and children who may need special education that are unaware that they qualify. School districts must also inform the public. Public awareness must be made before any identification, location, or evaluation activity begins through publishing or announcing in newspapers or other media to adequately notify parents in the district. School districts are also responsible for developing a comprehensive identification system that identifies students with disabilities. Under federal and state special education laws, as deaf or hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, deaf-blind, or having a speech or language impairment, a physical impairment, other health disability, developmental cognitive disability, and emotional or behavioral disorder, specific learning disability, autism spectrum disorder, TBI, or severe multiple impairments, and those who need special education and related services. The idea includes child fine mandates. All states must ensure that all students with disabilities from birth to age 21 residing in the state who are in need of special education and related services or are suspected of having a disability and being in need of special education are identified, located, and evaluated. School districts have an obligation to conduct child find, meaning they can't just wait for students to come to them. They must have proactive programs to seek and identify these children. If school districts fail to meet child find requirements, they're depriving children of having a FAPE, which is a violation of IDEA. Lastly, according to the IDEA, there are two ways in which a child may be identified to receive an evaluation under its law. 1. Parents may request that their child be evaluated at no cost to them. 2. The school system may ask to evaluate the child. Concerns may be based off of teacher recommendations, observations, or test results. Written consent must be given before an evaluation is conducted. Next, evaluations. An evaluation or re-evaluation is the process of using formal or informal procedures to determine specific areas of a student's strengths, needs, and eligibility for special education services. School districts must conduct a full and individual evaluation of a student for special education eligibility. All evaluation measures must meet all the state and federal requirements. Evaluations must include using a variety of assessment tools and strategies. A full and individualized evaluation must include areas that evaluate a student's health, vision, hearing, social and emotional status, general intelligence, academic performance, communicative status, and motor abilities. IDEA states the school district must ensure that the evaluation is sufficiently comprehensive to identify all special education and related services needs, whether they are commonly linked to the disability category in which the child has been classified. Minnesota Administrative Rules, Evaluations and Identifications. Initial evaluations. A school district shall conduct a full and individual initial evaluation. The initial evaluation should consist of procedures to determine whether a child is a student with a disability that affects the child's educational performance as defined by the Minnesota statute, who needs special education and related services to determine the educational needs. Informed consent of the parent of the child before the evaluation is conducted must be obtained. A district may not override the written refusal of a parent to consent to an initial evaluation or re-evaluation. Parental consent for evaluation should not be construed as a consent for placement or receipt of special education and related services. Next, reevaluations. Reevaluations must be conducted every 3 years and/or if a parent or teacher requests one. Part 3. Evaluation procedures. 1. Provide written notice to parents. 2. Use a variety of tools and strategies. 3. Use a variety of procedures. 4. Use technically sound instruments. 5. Tests and tools that are not discriminative on racial or cultural basis must be administered to students in their native language. And 6. Standardized tests must be validated. 7. Child is evaluated in all areas of a suspected disability. 8. The evaluation must be comprehensive. And 9. Determination of suspected disability is made by a team of professionals and parents. Part 4. Additional requirements for evaluations and re-evaluations. The IEP team must review existing evaluation data, identify additional data points from the parents, administer additional tests requested by the IEP team, obtain parental consent prior to evaluation, notify parents of results, whether if or not the student has a disability, and finally, conduct a functional behavior assessment. Part 5. Procedures for determining eligibility and placement. 1. You must obtain information from a variety of sources. 2. Document all information carefully. And 3. Develop the IEP. Part 6. The evaluation report. An evaluation report must be completed and delivered to the student's parents within the specified evaluation timeline. At a minimum, the report must include A. A summary of all evaluation results. B. Documentation of whether the student has a particular category of disability. C. The student's present level of performance and educational needs. D. Whether the child needs special education or related services. And E. Whether any additions or modifications to the special education and related services are needed to enable the student to meet the measurable annual goals set out in the IEP. Identification of students according to the Minnesota law. Minnesota law states that each district must develop their own identification system that identifies a student with disabilities from birth. Students that attend public and non-public schools that have a disability, or those who are student-age children who do not attend school. When it comes to identifying students with disabilities, a licensed physician or advanced practice nurse or licensed psychologist is qualified to make a determination of ADD or ADHD for purposes of identifying a child with a disability. Lastly, the state law states that all agencies involved have to do what they can to ensure the identified student gets what they need. Evaluation of students according to Minnesota law. Once a student has been identified, then you move on to the evaluation. Before the evaluation even begins, written notice must be provided to describe any procedures that are going to be used during the evaluation. A notice of refusal for evaluation can be sent by parents or other agencies if they do not wish for the evaluation to take place. Once parents and agencies have given permission, according to state law, there's a 30-day window for evaluation to be completed. This differs from the IDEA law, which states that there is a 60-day window for the evaluation to be completed. The supporting legal case in evaluation identification is a student versus the Minneapolis public school system. The student was identified in kindergarten as needing special education in the areas of EBD. The child was placed into a SPEN program, special program for elementary needs, and remained there until the second grade. The parents then wanted the student to have a re-evaluation to be placed back into her mainstream class with her non-disabled peers. It is noted that the student was removed away from all non-disabled peers and was offered no interaction with any of her peers. The student then was re-evaluated and was properly diagnosed with continuing to have EBD. However, did not meet the requirement for an LD diagnosis. The school district's IEP team decided to have the student remain in the SPEN program, although her education could have continued in mainstream with supplemental services. However, the parents did not agree with the school's decision and decided to pursue legal action. The outcome was that the school was considered wrong and they were to offer compensatory services of 50 hours to the student engaging with non-disabled peers. State requirements for identification and evaluation have several implications on school districts. Of course, the great thing is to identify the children and evaluate them. However, this does provide larger caseloads and increased workloads for teachers. The evaluation process requires districts statewide to follow specific mandated rules regarding due process paperwork. This can have a large impact on the special education teachers as they must be aware of all the current requirements and specific documentation through each piece of evaluation. Also, each school district must have one individual staff member who fulfills the role of being an intake specialist for the district. Along with the state-mandated rules for evaluation documentation, there are also timelines that must be followed. This can create stressful situations for teachers. The cost of evaluation tools and process of cost of keeping them updated also may be another implication. However, there are several ways that the state requires identification and evaluation can create implications for teachers. The overall positives of impacting a student's life outweigh the implications very quickly. Minnesota provides many resources to support school districts and families. The Minnesota Department of Education website has many valuable resources, links to helpful websites, downloadable materials, and training modules for districts and parents who are in the process of special education evaluation or identification. MDE offers a free manual that parents or districts can download titled Determining the Eligibility of Students with Specific Learning Disabilities, a technical manual. This manual can help anyone responsible making special education determinations for students, including legal requirements, background information, procedures, rules and laws, suggested practices, and tools and guide users in the identification process of students suspected of having a specific learning disability. The manual is very user-friendly and practical because it follows the chronological order and phases of the SLD identification. From the MDE website, if users click on the Educator Excellence tab, then Special Education in the Classroom, then finally clicking Categorical Disabilities here on the left, the webpage provides access to information in all of Minnesota's 13 categorical disability areas. The information found here is extremely specific for each disability category, and users also have access to numerous links that help guide them in understanding specific disabilities and can serve as a great resource in training and identification and evaluation purposes. Another website that is not specifically limited to the identification, evaluation, or eligibility of special education services is parentsneedtoknow.state.mn.us. I do feel it is too valuable to not mention. This website is organized by age groups where parents can find a parenting A to Z list of links to use as resources for being involved in their children's education. If you click on grade K through 12 and you scroll down, you will be able to see the list of parenting A to Z topics. It is known that parent involvement is extremely important in a child's education. This is another great resource that can help solidify that involvement for students and families in educational settings. This concludes our presentation on Minnesota identification and evaluation. Thanks for listening.